talk you through it. So this file here, I'll just quickly talk about what's going on in this file. It's just 4 layers. One is a vignette layer, which I'm just going to hide. The other 2 are 2 compositions and a background layer. Okay, the one composition is just the logo, and the other one is just the black background. I'm going to put this in solo mode just so that I just want to work on this green pre-comp right now. Okay, it's this video of the guy surfing, and it's got a fast blur on it. If I fly this open, you can see here it's got a fast blur. And fast blur is really just a Gaussian blur that renders quicker for purposes of rendering video. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this look like we're gonna tackle 3D today. Okay. So the cool thing about After Effects is you can have 2D layers, you can have 3D layers, you can have 2D layers in the 3D space, so you can do all these kind of really neat things. So to turn on 3D mode, what you have to do is just make sure that your toggles and your switches are on, because you want all these switches over here. This one here that looks like a cube, that's your 3D layer. It says right here, 3D layer allows this layer to be manipulated in 3 dimensions. No guff. Okay. I'm just going to turn that on for this green pre-comp layer. Now when I do that, notice what happens down here. Let me turn it off, and I'm going to talk about transform really quick. You see my transform options here when it comes to animation. We've got, let me zoom out here and see if I can, anchor point, position, scale, rotation, opacity. And if I open one of these, actually I'll just leave them like this. You can see I've got an X and a Y coordinate, same for scale, same for rotation. But if I turn this into a 3D layer, I get that third coordinate. So not only am I able to animate X and Y, but I'm also able to animate the Z axis, which is towards you or away from you. Okay. I'm just going to close this up really quick. I also have this other option here called material options. Talk about this really quick. We're not going to be using lights today, so it's a little doesn't really apply. But you can have this layer. If there's a lighting effect applied to it, you can cast its shadow onto other layers. You can affect how much ambient light this will reflect back to you, how much diffused light it'll absorb or give back. So things like this can actually change the way that this surface looks. Does it look like a really high gloss sheen like car paint, or does it look like felt, like a fabric that absorbs a lot of light? So I'm not going to jump too much into that because I'm going to talk about lighting on another day. So what I want to do is at least start you off in the right direction if you wanted to kind of create this screen that kind of flips around to another screen. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open my transform here, and I'm going to start altering some of these. So I'm going to think about, say this screen backed up from the actual full-size image, and then rotated, and maybe it was like a cube, right? Like each side of the cube was a different side of your app, and the screen changed when the cube rotated, and then went back into full screen to the user. So I'm going to start off that kind of animation, and if you guys wish to try and execute that, I encourage it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change, no wait, what am I going to do here? Sorry, I'm thinking about how I'm going to execute this. All right. So if I select this layer, first thing I want to talk about are these anchor points. So I've got the anchor point right in the middle of my object here, which is my composition of the guy surfing. You can see here this little red arrow is my x-axis, the green arrow is my y-axis, and this little blue dot is actually my z-axis. You just can't see it because the blue dot is pointing right at you. Okay. If you ever needed to change the position of this, because this is the point in which all of your animations are going to take place from. So if I were to rotate this, it's going to rotate from the center, both vertically and horizontally. Okay. But if you wanted to say rotate it from down here, I could do that. You can also just move this right away. If you just click on the little arrows here, I'm just going to move this on the y-axis, and you'll see my values change down here. So if I just click and drag this up, you can see that I can move this around. But if I don't want to move it relative to the center, I can move that anchor point. If I just run up here to this pan behind tool, I can you can see it says anchor point. I can change the anchor point for this object. So I'm just going to click on that. And I'm going to move my anchor point. I'm just going to click and drag it right down to the center and in the middle. Okay, so now any change that I make is going to be relative to that position. So let's make changes just so I can illustrate how that's going to work. I'm going to go to my rotation tool up here. It's in that second group along with the pan behind tool. I'm just going to click on it. And I don't actually want to rotate it by clicking on any of these. You can, but I'm actually going to just click right on this y-axis arrow right here. And I'm just going to click and hold and scrub left to right. And you'll see what happens is that I can actually rotate this in a 3D space. Now, if you notice, it might be hard to see up on the projector, but that blue arrow, now you can see what it's doing. It used to look like this because it was pointing right at you, but now you can see how that third dimension, that z-axis, is pointing right to you. Okay. If you wanted to alter the other axis, like the x-axis, you can tilt this forward and backward. Okay. Just going to undo those two things. Put this back in the center. Okay, so what I want to do is I want this screen to actually back up from my viewport to make it look like a cube, and then I'm going to animate this cube to rotate around. And the other side of the cube could be another side of, or it could be another screen of my app. Thing to note here is that if you want to do this technique, make sure that each side of the cube, if you wanted to do that, is its own composition, so that all you have to do is put the composition on your layer, or sorry, on your timeline, and just animate that layer to move with the other layers, and then whatever happens inside of that composition explains what the app does. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually animate the position right now. I'm going to animate the Z axis because I want this to step away from me. I don't remember how we did dimension when we did our previous project. The way to show dimension is to make something smaller, right? Well, that doesn't really help me here because when everything starts to rotate, I need everything to be in the same position. So I'm going to animate the position as opposed to the scale. So I'm just going to click and I'm going to drag this to the right. I'm going to bring it way down to like 650 or something. That's good. So here's it's a cube, it's a box, but you can still only see the one side of it. Sorry, I'm going to undo that. I need that a keyframe to drag my timeline over to, say, 12 frames, and I'm going to do that again. So there's my animation. Okay, so first it backs up, and then what happens is I'm going to have my box stop before it starts to rotate. Okay, go a couple frames just so that it's still. You can see that this guy's still surfing. And then I'm going to change the rotation of this. Okay, so to start my rotation, I want this to be my first frame. I want to rotate it on the y-axis. That's this axis right here. So I'm going to hit my stopwatch. I'm going to go, say, another 12-ish frames or so. And I'm going to rotate this. So think about the way that a box is structured. This is actually now going to go like that. I won't be able to see it after it gets past this point because the other side of the box will have overlapped it, but it's just a little bit more realistic this way. Okay. Now, not only does this need this can't stay here, right? Because this is the center of the box, and this edge will have moved over to the side. So I need to do one more position. I'm going to do that after because I really don't like the way that this animation looks. It's very robotic. I'm just going to hit space, do a RAM preview really quick. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Why do you keep saying it's a box?
Uh,
I don't really.
like a,
It's just like a flat rectangle.
yeah, I know, but I'm thinking that if here, let me if I can draw this on the screen really quick. I'm just going to test this again. So it's not bad, but it could use some work. Whenever I do an animation like this, first thing I like to do, just so that it doesn't look it's not all one speed, is I just highlight all my anchor points and I right click on them. Whoops. and I'll use the keyframe assist and do easy ease so that they ease in and ease out. Okay, so then my anchor points will change. And then I can open up my graph editor and I can play around with the speeds of these really quick. I'm going to have the cube start off animating really fast. You can see that it accelerates quite quickly and then it drops back down and it slows into its position. I'm just going to leave this one the way it is. Nice, easy transition. So see how the speed kind of changed as it backed up? But it can't stay there. So once it starts to rotate, think about this edge. There's another side to this cube, right? That needs to come around and end up at this position. So this edge needs to actually animate and finish up over here. So I'm going to look right up here and find my X and Y coordinates. I'm at about 1108. So that's where I want this edge to end up, is over here. I'm going to add another position keyframe. I want to finish off where this rotate is done. Then I'm just going to drag this. I don't want to use my rotate tool. I want to use my move tool. Drag this over. You can see how the dimension of that changed. See how it's a really thin panel now and it's getting a little bit wider. 1108. That's pretty close. You'll probably have to play around with this a little bit. So then your next panel would show up and this would completely disappear and you can just delete this layer and finish it right there. Does that make sense? So you can use that for any type of rotation that you want to do, whether it be horizontal or vertical, or if you want to make it look like a cube or something like that. Okay, so that's one. I'm just going to revert this file back to the start where I opened it. And I want to show you something called CC page turn. Have you guys ever seen those videos or something where it looks like a page is being pulled away and there's something underneath it? That's an effect in After Effects, so I'll show you what that is. I'm going to just put this composition in solo mode again so that I don't see everything else. And I'm going to actually page turn this composition, which is a video, to fold out, and then you can see what's underneath it. It's almost like peeling off a sticky note. Okay, so under the Effects and Presets menu, I'm just going to do a search for CC page turn. There it is right there. So as long as I have my composition selected, I'm going to double click on this to apply it. And you see that page turn right there. So there's a couple attributes that you can change here. I'm just going to leave this alone. I'm going to work on this down in my layers panel. You can see my fast blur is still being applied, which is kind of a pain. And I'm going to open my CC page turn. So there's a couple options that you can change down here. You can have this fold out from the bottom right corner. I'm going to change it to, say, the top left. The fold position, let me zoom out so you can see what that is. That's this little crosshair right here. So right now the fold position is at 960 and 360. I'm at frame 1 in my timeline. I'm just going to turn this back to 0 and 0, 0, 0. So it looks like nothing's happened. Here's my page turn, whoop, right there. Here's my page turn. So again, you can animate any of these that have the stopwatch in front of them. So I'm actually going to animate this fold position. I'm going to start right there by adding a keyframe, and I'm going to drag this out to 1 second. And at 1 second, I'm just going to, let me zoom out here a little bit so I've got a little bit more space. I'm just going to click and drag this page turn down to there. So now, it's kind of hokey, but if you guys want to try it, give it a whirl. So there, now you saw on that, you could actually see it reversed the video for you, and the video actually keeps playing. If you don't want to see that, and you just want to maybe put a solid color back there, you can change the back page option, set that to none, and then change the opacity. Let me zoom out so you can see what happens here. So the back of the page has none, and the blur is really wreaking havoc on this thing. I'm going to turn it off. So you can see here that the back opacity is 85%. I can kind of see through it a little bit here. Whoops. So if I crank that back up, I can change my color. Maybe I'll just pick yellow. So there, you can fold your pages away if you want. Does anybody have any questions about that? It's really easy to implement. Does anybody have any questions in general? Yep.
Where do we find this next one?
It's not on Blackboard. I didn't post it, just so that you guys could follow along.